With the last presentation of the evening, Mr. Bland, if you would, introduce yourself and your staff or associates, and also after doing so, if you could answer the question, can you operate within the mayor's proposed budget? And then the floor is all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Steve Bland, Chief Executive Officer of the Metro Transit Authority. With me at the front table are the Vice Chair of our board, Louis Levine, and our Chief Financial Officer, Ed Oliphant. I'm also pleased to welcome board member Gail Carr-Williams, sitting in the audience, as well as staff members Patricia Harris-Moorhead, our Director of Marketing and Communications, and Eric Beyer, our Council Liaison. The direct answer to your question is yes, the Mayor's proposed budget will allow us not only to sustain existing services at a very high level, but also will allow us to make several significant enhancements for our customers in the coming year. First of all, I'm very pleased to be here for my first council budget hearing. In the short time that I've been in Nashville, I've come to respect and enjoy working with this council, and I know that that statement mirrors the sentiment of our board and staff who have a much longer term relationship with you. To say that this past year has been an eventful year for public transportation in Nashville would be quite an understatement. Behind the headlines and debate of the past year, it's important to remember that ridership levels on both the MTA system and the services of the Regional Transportation Authority of Middle Tennessee continue to break modern annual records, with the combined ridership for the fiscal year to date on the MTA and RTA systems up another 2% over last year, and total combined fiscal year 2015 ridership expected to approach 11 million trips. This expanding ridership simply could not be realized without the levels of support that we've received from Metro through this budget process over the past few years. Among the 11 million trips, I'd be remiss if I didn't call out specific attention to our Access Ride system. Access Ride provides mobility for many of the most vulnerable populations in our community, including persons with disabilities and senior citizens. Residents of Davidson County can access this service regardless of whether or not they live in close proximity to our fixed-route bus service, and tens of thousands do. Access Ride carries more customers than any other door-to-door service in Tennessee, and demand continues to increase at rates that outstrip gains in all of our other service sectors. Now serving about 33,000 trips a month, Access Ride demand has been increasing at over 9% per year and certainly shows no signs of abating. Today, over 16,000 residents of Davidson County are registered for this service, and over 8,000 are active users. Residents of every council district are using Access Ride services on a daily basis. Of course, this past year also marked the end of the design process for the AMP bus rapid transit line between East Nashville and West Nashville. Although we weren't successful in starting construction on the city's first high-capacity transit line, the debate surrounding the project has escalated interest in expanded public transportation in this region to unprecedented levels. The debate on both sides of the AMP issue was spirited, but supporters and opponents alike agreed that Nashville and Middle Tennessee need a robust transit system capable of handling larger percentages of regional commuters. Not only is such a system necessary to address rapidly increasing congestion levels in our region, but also to assure that all Nashvillians are able to access the economic and quality of life activities, like our parks, that this region has to offer, whether or not they have access to a car. Toward that end, the MTA has initiated a strategic planning process to chart a course for the future direction of public transit in Nashville. With the support of the Mayor's Office and the Metro Council through the reallocation of unspent AMP design dollars, this process is intended to follow the lead of the Nashville Next process in seeking the input of as many people as we can. With a goal of receiving input from a minimum of 10,000 people, we're off to a good start with over 2,000 Nashvillians engaged to date through public meetings, our online presence, and our touring project bus. As we develop this plan, we anticipate generating a number of options for consideration by Nashville residents and community leadership for possible deployment in the coming years. A consistent theme I've heard around the community is that the plan should be inspirational, not just incremental, and that we should anticipate the needs of our city as the region is expected to see population increases approaching 1 million new residents over the next 25 years. However, a visionary plan without concrete action steps is more of a dream than a vision. While the plan is likely to generate a number of long-term ideas that will take a long time and considerable financial and political commitment to see daylight, it will also include specific service improvements and projects based on market demand and changing community expectations that can be implemented quickly and affordably. Many of these types of improvements are evident in our ongoing activities and are reflected in the FY16 budget request of Metro. In March of this year, we inaugurated our BRT light service in the Charlotte Avenue corridor on our newly designated Route 50. As you know, BRT light is characterized by more frequent service, fewer stops, faster travel times, and improved amenities at its stops. Although we will continue to install infrastructure along the route through this summer, more frequent service and extended spans are already in place and have been well received so far. If existing BRT light service in the Gallatin Road and Murfreesboro Road corridors are any indication, we are anticipating double-digit ridership increases annually compared to the pre-existing service. Funding for the startup of this service was included in the current year budget from Metro, and this budget proposal would fund the service for the full fiscal year 2016. We're also in the process of conducting public outreach surrounding planned BRT light service in the Nolensville Road corridor. With a planned rollout in spring 2016, we expect this service to be extremely successful due in large part to the dynamic nature of the corridor, and we've been fortunate to partner with the Mayor's Office of Neighborhoods to identify neighborhood stakeholders to solicit community input on the detailed aspects of the plan. With the recent opening of First Tennessee Park and ongoing development in the surrounding neighborhood, we've also expanded the availability of the Music City Circuit, MTA's free downtown circulator. As part of the robust plan for parking and circulation around the neighborhood in conjunction with the opening of the ballpark, the Music City's blue and green loops provide direct access from the Gulch and downtown core to First Tennessee Park and its environs. Sunday service on the circuit is now being offered for the first time and continues to grow in ridership and popularity. Crucial to providing competitive transit travel are amenities, information, and initiatives to improve overall service reliability. With respect to amenities, we've begun the installation of passenger waiting shelters under Mayor Dean's 100 Shelter Initiative. To date, we've installed 21 shelters and are completing about 15 each month. Beyond the capital expense associated with the project, which was incorporated in last year's capital budget process, this year's operating budget incorporates expansion in shelter maintenance staff to make sure that we can keep these properties in positive condition in each of the neighborhoods. One of the most frequent questions I get around Nashville is, where's my app? We're rapidly coming to completion on our automatic vehicle location system, and by the end of this calendar year, we anticipate customers will have real-time information available to them. Finally, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the approximately 700 MTA employees who serve our customers each day. I think they can lay a legitimate claim to being some of the most polite and friendly in the country. I've ridden systems all over the country, and certainly I think ours top everyone. And it's important to know that as the largest single item in our operating budget request, that these employees care deeply about the customers that they serve. So with that, I'd like to thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the council, for your ongoing support, and also to our board of staff, our board of directors, our staff and customers for their ongoing interest in transit in Davidson County. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you, Ms. Bland. We'll open up the floor for council members' questions. Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. On J78-4, you show a decrease in fuel, $2.2 million. What contingencies do we have in place? Because obviously fuel has been all over the board for the last 12 months. What contingencies do we have in place? And maybe, Mr. Riebling, this is a question to you as well. I know we do the fuel hedging.
Right.
I think Rich, you told me when the contract's up. I don't remember when it was, but it's sometime in the next year or so, or is it next year? Am I remembering correctly?
Excuse me, sorry. I was trying to hide, but I wasn't successful.
No.
We have fuel hedging contracts, and Ed can help me on this because he works closely with us on this. We have fuel hedging contracts in place through the end of this next fiscal year.
Through the end of next fiscal year.
Fiscal 16.
Okay. All right. So this is a pretty safe bet then.
One of the drops, and the reason why there's a drop in the fuel costs is because the diesel costs are going down dramatically next fiscal year. I can't remember the numbers, Ed, but it's over $1. $1.73. Yeah. So
okay.
it's from two. It's like from three. No, two. 270 something to 170 something. It's down, give or take $1, diesel prices are going down this year. There you go. Thank you,
Okay.
Councilman. There you go.
And we're locked in on that, on the hedge then?
Right,
so-
now but again, that's not at 100% of our fuel needs, but it's at around 70 to 80% of our fuel capacity.
Okay.
So we're at risk for 20% of the market price.
Just as internal service fees are kind of spread out amongst the various departments, I happen to read the reports each month that you send out on if we have to pay the bank or we get the money.
Right.
If $500,000 has to be paid back because we got the savings,
Right.
how is that charged?
Yes, sir. It's a fair question. We have internally created a policy where we like MTA, again, my percentages are off a little bit. MTA is 30% of the hedge. Schools is another 30%. Metro governments, another 30. City of Franklin's a little bit. And so we have agreed at the beginning of the year on what the percentages are allocated to each of the departments that are participating. And then who they get dinged to whatever or get the positive, and as was in the past, whatever those numbers are based on those percentages.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eveling. And then going down.
I shouldn't be speaking. I want to thank Rich for helping make this happen. I mean, a few years ago, he kind of took the ball and ran with it, and it's made a big difference.
Oh, absolutely. And I was with the school board at the time, and it has. It's been a great tool. Let's go down to decrease in federal capital operating reimbursements. It looks like about $1.2 million there. Obviously, I think we all know where the country is with regards to debt. Do we see that continuing, and is that something that we as a local government need to continue to, I guess, expect to have to keep pumping more money in if we're going to continue the level of service that is being provided at present? Sure.
The biggest cause behind the drop in that particular line is we had gotten some, I'll call it seed money, the Congestion Mitigation Air Quality Fund, toward increased service frequency in the West End corridor. And that money has a 3-year time lapse on it, so we're seeing the money lapse out. Probably the bigger concern at the federal level is we're on an ongoing series of just extensions to the federal bill, so it gives you it's an impossible job to try to predict, what they're going to do or when they're going to do it. Congress in the last couple of weeks just passed another 2-month extension. These had historically been 6-year bills, and now we're running on 2 to 5 month extensions at a time, so it makes it very difficult to plan for that piece of the funding partnership. I do think it's a fair statement, though, Councilman, to say that, if we in Nashville decide we need to make a significant jump in a transit presence in the region, not just in Nashville, but throughout the region, I'm sure the federal government will be a partner. They won't be a dominant partner.
Okay. All right. And this is not budget related, but let me just say this. I did have a constituent in my area with your access ride that you guys have reached out to and helped, and I just wanted to tell you thank you for being responsive to that and to his questions and concerns. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councilman Tiger.
Thank you and welcome, Steve. There's a notation about in your notes about additional professional attorney fees for ongoing litigation. Without any specifics of that, is that anything for us to worry about?
Anytime you go into litigation, you obviously assume you're going to win. So we don't think that it's anything to be significantly concerned about. There are 2 particular cases that they're working on right now, but they don't bear an undue risk to the authority and their long-term financial health. It's frankly a kind of a nuisance thing for this fiscal year.
Okay. If we learned anything from the AMP discussion, it was that there is tremendous desire in this community for a comprehensive plan. People are willing to pay a reasonable amount if they knew what those sources are. So my question is, which comes first? The discussion about dedicated funding sources and then the routes so we know what we can afford to build? Or do we say, here's what we want to build, now we got to figure out how to pay for it? Or do these things have to dovetail together?
Sure. They really tend to dovetail. Most of the cities that have successfully dealt with this we're able to build support at whatever funding level, big, medium, small, once people in that region had a better idea of what their dollars were going to buy for them. So rather than saying, well, give us this amount of money and then we'll tell you what you get, that really has to run in lockstep. Our intent through the strategic planning process, right now we're doing very high-level public engagement to get a sense of people's values and visions of what they'd like to see. We'll then apply, data from the region, development trends, population trends, information from the Nashville Next process, and we'll develop a set of scenarios that people can take a look at and say, we like this about option A, that about option B, don't like this about option C. Those will be done at a couple different financial assumption levels, something that's relatively status quo if we don't, move much, maybe stay the same at per capita funding, but assume increases as population grow, all the way up toward levels where some of our aspirational peer cities, cities like Charlotte or Austin, are spending to say, okay, at this level we can make these improvements, at a higher level we can make these improvements. With a sense of what the public reaction is to that, I think that gives decision makers, not just our board, but frankly elected leadership, a better sense of, do we grab for the brass ring, try to get that bigger dedicated funding source, because frankly that would be beyond the means of just an annual appropriation process, but have that dialogue, with the community.
I read with interest the new proposed, or not proposed, the Music City Star stop at a new development. Tell us a little bit about the dynamics and the process to create this public-private happening.
Yeah, it's a project we're really excited about on the RTA side. What the councilman's referring to is the pending station at Hamilton Springs, which is actually located in the city of Lebanon. A developer in Wilson County, Jack Bell, has been working for some years on higher density residential development, some retail development in that area. He had approached the city and the RTA about getting an additional train stop. City was able to identify some federal funding, and then developer is picking up a good chunk of the cost of that station. And obviously, from the developer's perspective, it increases the value of those units. He's specifically marketing those units to people who would commute in and out of Nashville on the Star. And I don't frankly think, Councilman, it's going to be the last time we see that on the Star. The Star's been in operation now for about 8 years. Carries about 1,000 riders a day, much different market profile than we see on long-range commuter bus services. We're getting more interest in other areas along the line from the development community, and I think you're going to see some more of that type of activity in those public-private partnerships start.
I just couldn't help believe, with all the cranes here in town and the development going on, that, if there were the routes in place now or the plan to discuss, that some of this could be happening with these private dollars to help build the stations and take the load off, and it would make it more palatable to a lot of folks who are going to say, I don't want to pay anything because I'll never ride it, which I think is the wrong approach, that they will ride it if we provide it.
Right. Well, and absolutely, as we get to in the MTA strategic planning process, the idea of identifying projects and services and start looking at financing and funding mechanisms, public-private partnerships, and private sector participation will certainly be a part of that equation.
Thanks for your input.
Thank you.
Councilor Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. 5 more. Thank you. One, I want to say our city is blessed with your leadership. You have been so accessible and accommodating in terms of answering questions. And of course, I also had a elderly constituent that was taken care of, and I mean, we are just appreciative to you all going above and beyond in helping in any way you can. With the expansion of the BRT along Nolensville Road and the soon-to-be CHS arrival within our community. I'm looking at, we have the BRT along Murfreesboro Road, and then you're going to have the next adjacent corridor. That area in between, that will be, the Bell Road area right in front of where CHS will go, as well as in between both of those corridors. Is there any plans in terms of expanding the BRT along that route as well? I just wanted to know if there's any discussions as to how to accommodate that presence of CHS.
Well, one of the conversations overall on the Nolensville BRT Light, it's a little bit more complicated service than the ones we've developed so far because there are a number of route variants that go off of Nolensville Road. So one of the things we're chatting with the public about is what that service model looks like. So even beyond the skip stopping and the stations, it's, well, do we do a trunk route and then run routes that connect to it, or do we do different variants? In general, to be frank, as we're looking at the data supporting our planning efforts, southeastern part of the county is one of the most dynamic, for lack of, I don't mean to hold it against any other part of the county. It's all pretty interesting. But both in terms of the actual numbers growth, population growth, but frankly, we look at in those numbers what's referred to in our business as a transit propensity index. You know, there's certain development characteristics, demographic characteristics, rider characteristics that lead you to conclude people are more likely to ride transit in an area, and that's certainly prevalent down there. So that whole area is frankly going to be, you know, an interesting area of focus during our planning process, and we would certainly invite, you know, your input and the folks that you know down in that region to participate very actively.
On your accomplishments under the STRIVE program, I see the number that you've listed in terms of the 767,000 rides. Am I correct on that?
Right.
Did that meet or exceed your goal?
We've been really delighted, and actually that number is correct, it's accurate, but it is dated, so it's not through the end of the school year. I think that number was through April? Yep, through the end of April, so obviously we had the entire month of May, and that's actually even reflecting the lost school days due to the weather this year. From the MTA's perspective, I'd call it an unqualified success, and we've actually had a lot of inquiries from other cities about the partnership between the city, the school district, and the transit authority. And for us, it's sort of a twofold. You know, we've seen about an 11.5% general increase in youth ridership, you know, as a direct outcome of STRIDE. Obviously, it's the ability of high school kids to be able, frankly, not only to get back and forth to school, whether it's a regular public school or, you know, magnet school or what have you, but from my perspective, looking down the road, is we're actually teaching future consumers of public transit how to use that system. You know, when I talk to folks in Nashville who frankly never ridden a public bus, let's say somebody my age, it's almost a lost cause. If we can get them, you know, when they're 15, 16, and they can't drive, they don't have access to a car, just get them familiar. Doesn't mean maybe they're going to use it 100% their entire lives, but just get them familiar with how to use the system. Then when it is a convenient option, or when they're in a situation in their lives where they don't have access to a car, you know, that market's ready to be had. So for us, it's kind of a double good program.
Well, I see you maximizing upon that opportunity, and I again commend you all for your incredible efforts to increase ridership and provide access so that people can utilize transit as much as possible. I mean, there is obviously a demand. It's one of the number one issues in the current mayoral race. And so it's just incumbent upon us to get serious about making I know you had also put on here as one of your strategic issues, improving commute times and, you know, better being able to serve the elderly population. So we've definitely got some work to do. I think you're up to the task, and I appreciate your board and your dedicated staff. You all are just incredible. And your budget change and impact highlight sheet that you gave to us as council members is one of the best snapshots that I have received throughout this entire budget process. So I thank you all for being so open, transparent, and willing to go above and beyond to help make transit even better and a bigger reality for so many people. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Councilman Glover.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This will not affect this year's budget, and obviously we're all watching what the vote's going to look like next Tuesday. I've talked to the Sheriff's Department about this, and I'm going to ask you basically the same question. The Sheriff has said that when someone's released, there are about 90% of the people have transportation, but there's been some concerns that there's only 2 stops a day in that area. Will you, and this is really a question more than anything else, will you work with the Sheriff to try and coordinate times and things of that nature in the event it is relocated?
Yep, absolutely.
Okay.
And as part of our general planning process, one of the outreach efforts is beyond the general public and current riders is actually other stakeholders. Sheriff's Department would certainly fall into that, as would a good bit of the social service community.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Bland, seeing no other members in the queue, that concludes your presentation. We certainly appreciate you all being here, and the information very valuable.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of council.